This is Digital Marketing Depot, broadcasting live. I'm Karen Burka, your webinar producer. Thank you for joining us today for Unifying Your Search and Social Ad Strategy. We are very pleased to welcome Michelle Stinson-Ross, Director of Marketing Operations at Apogee Results, and Connie Lanter, Senior Customer Success Director with Marin Software. Before I turn the webinar over to our speakers, I want to tell all of you a couple of things. If you need some help or have a question for our speakers, just use the Q&A box, and we will do our best to help you. If you want to tell a friend, check out our sponsor, Marin Software, or Digital Marketing Depot. There are some widgets at the bottom of your screen. Just click on them, and they will take you where you want to go. Remember that you can customize your audience console to move or resize any windows that you have open. Now, we are going to hear a lot of great content today, so I wanted to let you know we are recording this broadcast, and we will make it available for viewing on demand this afternoon. I'll send an email when it's ready. So with that business taken care of, let me make some more formal introductions. Michelle Stinson-Ross is an industry-recognized authority on digital marketing, in particular, the convergence of content, search, and social media. As the Director of Marketing Operations at Apogee Results, Michelle is the agency's internal marketing strategist and a key marketing strategy consultant to the agency's clients. Connie Lanter has over 20 years of experience in customer success and account management across various industries in both traditional and digital media. Her expertise includes using performance marketing to drive revenue and brand awareness for global customers. Now, you can see more complete bios and contact information for our speakers on the left side of your audience console. Remember, if you have questions for our industry experts, please make good use of that Q&A box. I'll get to as many of those questions live after the formal presentation. So before I turn the webinar over to Michelle to get us started, audience, we wanted to ask you a question about your own efforts in unifying your search and social strategies. You have multiple choice here, but we'd like you to select one. Here's our question. How would you describe your paid advertising strategy today? Is it search only, social only, search and social in silos, or perhaps you think you're doing a pretty good job at unifying your search and social advertising? So I'm going to give you just a couple more seconds to click on your response. Then I'm going to pull up the results, and I'm going to bring Michelle Stinson-Ross in here to look at them with me and take a look and see where our audience is at with their efforts. So Michelle, very interesting. We've got our audience really feels that their search and social are in silos, and I guess that's what has brought them here to hear what you and Connie have to say.
Good to know. Greetings, everyone. Thank you, Karen, for inviting me to be a part of this today. Interesting that everybody has search and social in silos. I want to talk about how to look at your paid media in a more omni-channel approach, where we get rid of the silos. We actually have search and social and content and all of your digital marketing kind of working together. We'll also talk a little bit about how search and social fit in the customer journey and how to build those cross-functional teams. So first, let's talk a little bit about the omni-channel approach. For us as marketers, as business owners, we tend to look at digital marketing as a set of disparate disciplines: SEM, SEO, video production, email marketing, content marketing. But the truth is that most of the people out there look at our brand more the way we look at Lego, that Lego is Lego is Lego, no matter where we happen to bump into it, whether we see them on Facebook or at lego.com or even when we engage with the Lego chatbot. They see us as a brand no matter where they happen to run into us. And this is why the omni-channel approach is so important. It factors in the reality that customers look at a brand very differently than the way we look at our own brands. Rather than creating separate campaigns for each discipline or channel, when you're using the omni-channel approach, we craft those campaigns to meet specific business objectives and then engage the appropriate discipline or channel for that goal. For example, one of the clients that I work with here at Apogee Results is Capson Physicians Insurance. Now, Capson provides medical malpractice insurance to doctors. It is absolutely a B2B company. we aren't marketing Capson's product to just any and everybody. Matter of fact, we don't even market it to doctors all over the U.S. because it's an insurance product. We market it only to the states where Capson provides coverage. And one of the things that happened when Capson came to us is they said, hey, we've got this great website that's all set up to generate leads, as you'll notice with these big phone number and get a quote buttons in the top of this screenshot. The site was ready to go, but for whatever reason, they just weren't getting enough traffic and therefore not enough business to even generate leads and kind of get started with selling their product directly to doctors. So when they came to us, we said, what you really need to do is engage in an omni-channel approach where we're putting Capson in front of the right people at the right time all over the digital space. So we talked a lot to this client about how search and social kind of fit into the customer journey. Now, for most of you, this is probably a very familiar image. When we talk about the customer journey, we talk about how customers move from awareness to consideration to purchase, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We really like, as marketers, to simplify things down to a point where it seems like it's a straight line, but is it really? Are our customers really this simplified? I would have to say, no, probably not. The customer journey is far more four-dimensional. In the process of engaging with us, they can move forward, they can move backwards, left, right, up, down. They come to us at different points and times in their life, in their business, whatever. And it's incumbent upon us to really take in that entire four-dimensional aspect of the customer journey and let them choose whether they're going to take a train, a bus, a helicopter, a hovercraft, whatever, to engage with us and do business. So when we talk about how search and social fit into this customer journey, we have to take into the fact that actually social enables us to meet a customer really early on, even before they're aware that they have a problem, before they're aware of who we are as a business. And then as we nurture that relationship, as they gain awareness and begin to consider, oh, yeah, this really is something that I need to deal with in my business life or my personal life, then they start to search. Then they start to actually ask questions. Then they start to move from consideration to purchase. And that's what we've seen, especially with our paid media and Capson, is that paid social placement has allowed us to be very top of the funnel and capture positions for Capson before they're even really aware that Capson is an option to them. And then as they begin to learn more, they start hitting search and PPC and developing this relationship. Like I said, omni-channel allows us to take into consideration not the simplified version of our customer base, but all of the flavors and styles and ways that customers really genuinely think about their work, their life, their whatever. So one of the things we found a lot of success for is actually paid video placement for Capson. We're doing this on Facebook. We're targeting doctors. We're doing B2B outreach for a very niche audience on Facebook, and it's paying off big time. By using video placement as our first touch in social media, we capture an audience that really finds what we have to say relevant, and they're ready to walk along that journey with us for a while. So, how do you build a cross-functional team that can bring success to your business, your clients? I'm going to show you. So what we found is that in order to break down the silos, stop any kind of infighting over budget or ideology or whatever, we have to step back to the campaign level. And that's why I said the omni-channel approach really takes into consideration the business goals. When we start there and we say, for example, like for Capson, they needed to drive more leads through their website. So the goal was, X number of leads for a period of time, right? We then said, okay, so what things can we do that drive traffic and therefore leads into the website? And we ticked off a list of channels and disciplines that work for them. And then we set an overall campaign budget that said, okay, for the next, say, 3 months, we're going to spend X amount of dollars to drive leads. Now, that money can actually be spent in several different places. Some of it's spent in paid social, some of it's spent in paid search. We also spent money on content development and SEO. There were several things at play. But when the budgeting, the money itself is set at the campaign level specifically to reach a business goal, we find that the teams are all like, okay, we're all in this together. Here's our pool of money to work with. And the buy-in from each of the disciplinary experts working on a particular campaign, a particular project, really rises up to a new level, and we don't tend to see a lot of fighting around. And I've done this both in an agency situation and in-house. I had an in-house team that I worked with several years ago here in Austin that we sat down and we did a lot of campaign level planning together. I had our SEO, our PR person, as well as our content editor and myself as the social media person in the room, all talking about what topics do we want to discuss, which aspects of our, it was a coupon business, of the coupon space do we want to talk about this month, this week, this whatever. That's the other thing, getting that entire team in a room to talk about how this campaign looks, how this campaign is going to work, is the other part of building a really good cross-functional team that we all have buy-in, we all have investment in the success of any individual campaign. And just to prove my point, here are some general month-over-month and year-over-year numbers. This is what we did for Capson in a very small amount of time in driving organic traffic. So this is actually organic search traffic, but it was supported by a lot of things that we were doing in paid. That's a pretty significant jump, and we're on a trajectory to just keep that going now because everything's integrated, everything's intermeshed and working together. This is kind of interesting for us. So this, I apologize if these numbers are a little bit small. This is this year so far compared to last year. Yes, you are reading that correct. Contacts assigned to a salesperson for the first quarter of this year is already up over 400% from what it was last year. And the number of contacts worked by their internal sales team is up, yes, that does say 11,000%. So the reason why you see new deals created and deals closed and one still down, well, we're early in the year. Obviously, we can expect that as these contacts are worked through the system, we'll see the rest of those numbers continue to go up, up, up over the course of the year when compared to last year. All because we've engaged every channel we can possibly engage for a very unified purpose, for a very specific business goal. And because our team realizes that search and social and content all work together, we're driving a lot of success very quickly for a very niche B2B brand. And that kind of concludes what I had to say. Karen, do we have any more questions for the audience?
We do. Thank you so much, Michelle. Audience, Michelle's given us some great information about how creating a unified marketing approach can really work. But we know there's barriers, right? And we saw from your answers to our first poll question that we've got some silos out there. So we wanted to dig a little deeper and find out from you, what is your single biggest barrier to running combined search and social campaigns? Again, we've got some different choices here, but we need you to choose just one. Is it that you have no shared budget for search and social? Do you have different goals for each team? Do you have separate search and social teams? Do you have some infighting over credit for conversions? Or maybe there's another barrier that you're dealing with at your organization. So think about that for a couple of seconds before you click on your results. And I want to remind everyone that Connie and Michelle are going to be here to answer your specific questions about your own organization's difficulties with search and social. So make sure you get those questions in. We're going to try and save some time to answer those towards the end of our webinar. Right now, we're going to pull up the results of this poll question, and Connie Lanter from Marin Software is going to begin her remarks. So Connie, let's take a look here and see what our audience has to say about the barriers to their goals. So we've got 28% who say others. So there are some other barriers out there that maybe are not so well known, but definitely some separate search and social teams. Do these results surprise you at all?
The results don't surprise me, Karen. The separate search and social teams and the no shared budget, you know, I'm curious about what the other is. I bet it's probably a combination of several of these. So definitely plays into what we're going to talk about for the second half of the presentation. So perfect inlay to that. So thanks everyone for answering that question. Go ahead and talk a little bit about what we see with specific use cases. Basically, you know, Michelle talked a lot about the success and how Capson did such a nice job. So I do want to take a step back and talk about why we aren't all doing this now, knowing that 62% of you aren't able to manage search and social together. And for the about 20% who are managing it together, I am very curious about if that's 100% or if you're maybe more at a 20 to 30% of your budgets are managed together, or if anybody is at closer to 100%, because definitely with my customers, there are a lot of hurdles and pain points that they have to get through. So let's talk about those, because I'm sure many of you can relate to those. So definitely team silos have been the norm. Michelle talked about this too. The separate budgets, everybody's used to doing their own thing. Then there's a lack of communication between the teams because you have separate budgets, you have separate managers. In many cases, you all roll up to a digital marketing manager or a digital VP or a marketing manager, but really you operate quite separately. And I've definitely found with my customers that even if they sit in the same office, in some cases they sit right next to each other, still they don't collaborate other than sometimes to talk about what campaigns they're running, but it's really not collaboration from the ground up in most cases. It's not, we're developing the assets for digital and this is going to be the ads served on Facebook and this is going to be the ads served on Twitter and this is going to be the SEM you know, ads. The creative isn't built from the ground up. It's more somewhere in between. You know, sometimes they align, sometimes completely different campaigns are being lighted. And there are conflicting strategies for sure. You know, a lot of this has to do with the sheer makeup of it because search has traditionally gotten credit because we're at the bottom of the funnel. And then with social, you know, having less maturity, social is a few years behind search. So where we saw SEO and SEM kind of evolve, that's what we're seeing with social. So we're seeing that there's just less maturity, there's less talking between the two teams. Sometimes the paid social team came up through organic, often they're still doing organic. So just a lot of different things going on there. Then we'll talk a little bit about the different, even the ad types. So the collateral doesn't match. A lot of things don't match in these silos. So if we don't start from the ground up, sharing those resources and that collateral and making sure we have the right creatives can be really challenging. We're trying to re-engineer it mid-process. You know, this is the way we've always done things. Search has operated separately. Social has operated separately. We've never had to worry about, on the search side, well, do we have enough video assets? Do we have enough photos for carousel? So then, you know, maybe social inherits some of search's pain points and vice versa when we start to collaborate together. In addition to that, I talked a little bit about how we've traditionally targeted different parts of the funnel. You know, there's definitely a lot of talk about how Facebook now can drive conversions, and we're seeing more conversions driven by Facebook in the last couple of years. And you do hear me talk a lot about Google and Facebook, just knowing that upwards of 75% of people's time online is spent on Google and Facebook. So, we tend to focus more on those. But when I talk about those, I'm definitely talking about social and search, so as a whole. But looking at the consumer journey, so I know that Karen mentioned in the beginning that I have experience in traditional media and in digital media. So, for years we've been trying to crack the consumer journey, and we're still trying to do that, of course. There's no holy grail. There's no easy way out. Still difficult to figure out, did that person come into the store and they also searched for that term earlier and then ended up coming into the store and actually making that purchase, much less did they also see our Facebook ad, or are they in our Facebook group, or did they see our tweet? So a lot of different issues there with the different parts of the funnel. And then as I talked about some of the different terms, we all have our own acronyms. Search knows a little bit of social generally. Social knows a little bit of search. There are varying degrees of that. I know I am finding with some of my customers now who have been at mature enterprise organizations, I'm seeing some of them then go out and work for startups, and the excitement for them is that they get to do all digital at the startup. So they get to learn social when they've traditionally been a search expert, or vice versa. So that's interesting, especially at these smaller companies. We're seeing people do more of both, and we're seeing more of the, they can break down the barriers more easily, especially if they're hired to do both. Of course, their expertise lies in one, so they have some hurdles to overcome to get over that. And then the last piece, let's say we all agree on this. Everybody finally agrees that it makes sense to have a digital strategy, or, okay, we're going to test this with one campaign, or we have a group who's willing to do this, or we have an individual who's managing search and social. Then the discussion becomes a really big speed bump of how do we give credit. So what is our attribution model? We've traditionally relied on last click. Well, then search is probably going to get most of the credit in that case. Do we change that attribution model? What does that make our reporting look like? What does our board say to that? What do our executives say to that? A lot of talk over months and months of time usually about who gets the credit and how do we determine who gets the credit. So is search okay with now seeing that, $500 of revenue is not $500 for them and $500 for Facebook and double counting, but search is getting 50% and social is getting 50%. Can we all agree that this is part of the consumer journey and we're all contributing to it and it's for the greater good? Maybe and maybe not, because we've been very protective of our budgets, our livelihood. We've shown these great results. Now our number's going to look down. It's really like rephrasing it internally too, so that as we're doing that reporting up, it doesn't look like our numbers went drastically up or drastically down. We're really resetting and course correcting, and now we're giving the correct credit versus in the past we were double counting. So while it may be, oh gosh, the truth may hurt, it's really more what is the root here? What's the actual? So it doesn't have to hurt anyone, because as long as we lift everybody up, then it's positive, because we're all trying to drive conversions for the company. So with that, I'll get into a couple of success stories with my customers. These are actually just earlier this year. Both happened in January, and we'll be working on case studies with them. So these are at this point de-identified success stories, but the customers have approved that we could talk about them today and are very excited about their results. So Michelle talked about a B2B company, about Capson earlier, and their great success. And I will talk about a B2B also. I wanted to first talk about a retailer. So traditionally, we do think about social as working well for retail, the same way that for search, we think of shopping working well for retail. But as we found with many of our B2B companies, when you creatively use shopping, for example, for your software services, or you can also creatively use social to market B2B. So I'll get into that example second, but we'll start with more traditional. So we have a large retailer that we work with. They work with Marin on search and social. They started with us on search, and then later they added Marin Social, and they actually do take advantage of our social managed services, so they have us execute some of their campaigns. So we did work with them very closely and worked with them on managed services in this case. So I think that also made it a lot easier on them because we did a lot of heavy lifting. So in January, we ran a 3-week flight. And it took a couple of months. Well, actually, we started talking about it in December, or maybe it was late November. And, traditionally a really busy time. I remember it was right after Black Friday, and they had a really successful Black Friday. The numbers were so good between search and social that they said, we've made the numbers for the year. We're in good shape now. So they could, after all of that work, take a breather, and we approached them about doing the search intent to social, which they had never done before. And we talked about all of the hurdles. In this case, the budgets were separate, and 2 different people managed search and social. In fact, they were across the country, so one person was in Vancouver and one was here in San Francisco. So they definitely had some hurdles to get over. They were excited enough about it, and also they have very aggressive goals that they said, okay, we can figure out how to make this work because we continue to have every year more and more aggressive goals that we need to meet, and we want to get to those, and we've got to take it to the next level. So what we did is we found some audiences that made sense. We were doing different clothing items is what we were targeting. And we decided to run this in January, which I was a little bit concerned because January is definitely a traditionally very slow time for them, especially versus November and December. But it was a good time to kick off the year, and we said, well, if it works in January, then it could work at any point in the year. They needed to figure out how do we make this work. So they actually developed along the way, and they didn't do like a big, best practices plan or anything. We just worked together and figured out, okay, how does this work well, and let's just write it down and develop that this is the best practice. And then, we kind of eyeballed what the best practice would look like. Then we tried it, and then when we needed to course correct, we changed it and documented it so that moving forward, they know how to execute this to go really smoothly in the future now that they've done it once. So we tagged the search intent campaign. So when someone searched for a very specific term that we believed would then do well on social, we tagged that in the URLs, and then when that person was on Facebook, we retargeted them with a Facebook ad. And it was wildly successful. They were very excited about it from the start to the finish because we drove conversions, but we also took a lot of heavy lifting off of them. So they were able to leverage us to create ads in multitude, create audiences in multitude. So they were able to create 30 different audiences once it was set up within a couple of clicks. And we were automatically creating the ads in multitude. We had so many ad sets. And that definitely worked for them because then we were able to serve the right messages. So if someone had searched for a green tennis shoe earlier that day, we weren't when they were on Facebook later that day. We were not targeting them with a blue pants ad. We were targeting them with a green shoe ad. And then they were more likely to convert, and they did. So they had 15% increase in conversions. Their incremental ROAS was 9 times higher, and they had an increase in sales, incremental increase of over 100,000. And I will say that they had very tight restrictions on how we could count this, and we also worked very, very closely with Facebook on this since it was a big test and a big enterprise account and retailer. So they felt good about the results. You know, if we hadn't been so strict about how we counted it, you could be looking at double and triple these numbers. So that was pretty exciting. I know that many of you are B2B though. So, you know, if I were you, I'd be thinking, well, yes, okay, you know, retailers have a lot to market. I don't have pretty green shoes and pretty green or blue pants to market. I have software. So let's take a look at a B2B software company that also worked with us in January on a similar flight. So these are just both coincidentally January. I guess it was my search intent month. So they, you know, they were a little bit skeptical in the beginning. I want to say we talked with this customer for about 18 months about leveraging search intent, leveraging Marin Social. They definitely bought into the idea of it, but then, you know, how to do it was a huge hurdle. We talked about those silos earlier, different people managing it. And this company has their digital team as basically an internal agency. So they have, in addition to the internal digital marketing team, they also have product managers. So basically the internal digital marketing team, there would be a search and a social point person, and then there's also the product marketing manager who has their own take on search and social and search intent. So additional people beyond what, you know, what some of you see. So that was another hurdle, because how do we get everyone on the same page? We don't have this third bucket of a shared budget. We have a search budget. We have a social budget. There's no experimental budget or overall digital marketing budget or, like I said, third bucket. So that was one concern. They weren't using Marin Social. That was another that, okay, we'd have to learn something new. We're not using this now. We'd have to get up and running on it. We'd have to make all of our connections, et cetera. In the end, though, they decided that it would be worth their while to try, and this also was at the end of their fiscal year, so this was one of those, well, let's leave in a blaze of glory kind of thing, do everything we possibly can to contribute to a really successful fiscal year, and again, very large goals. So we also had an opportunity here because it became a case where one person was managing search and social for the specific software. So that helped. It was opportunistic. However, she had never used Marin Search or Marin Social, so she was new to both. So we quite quickly, at the end of the year, got her up to speed and launched this campaign. And it ended up being a 3-day flight. It actually was incredibly fast as it hit at the very end of their fiscal year, and they were doing a discount on their products, so they didn't want it to run very long, and they just wanted to leave it at a very short amount of time. So we ran it on search, and then we retargeted on social. We automatically created those audiences similar to what we did for the retailer. And then when we retargeted them, we saw a 120% increase in the conversion rate. Their cost per conversion was right in line what they needed, in fact, on the low end. And we had 109 more incremental conversions in actually it was 2 days' time, not 3. So we could also show, because with both of those, with the retailer and with the B2B company, we did a holdout test. So we worked closely with Facebook and did the holdout. So all of these are above and beyond what they would have gotten otherwise. So we were very happy with the results. And I think that, you know, basically the key takeaway here, if I were listening to this, is that there are ways to get around all of the silos and the hurdles that we have. It all starts with a conversation. So it's worth taking baby steps because you can see in the results it pays off in the end. So with that, I will leave it to the Q&A, but hopefully you found this to be very helpful today.
Thanks so much, Connie, and thank you to Michelle, too. We've given our audience a lot to think about. We've got lots of questions coming in for the two of you, so we definitely want to spend a little bit of time trying to get to our audience questions. We will have about 20 minutes, so that's great. So let's get started. What I'm going to do, Connie and Michelle, is read the question out to you, and you're going to have to think on your feet a little bit. So, Connie, this came in while you were talking, and it's pretty specific, so I'm going to direct it to you first, and then Michelle, if you have some thoughts on it, we'll let you chime in as well. So how did you set up a successful attribution model? And I would assume this came in while you were talking about one of your case studies, Connie. So maybe discuss the idea of setting up attribution models that can unify search and social.
Sure, absolutely. So that's actually pretty easy for me to answer. How did you set up a successful attribution model? Because we have at Marin a product that actually does the deduplication. We call it TruePath, and it gives partial credit to Facebook and partial credit to Google. It's definitely in a beta stage at this point, but I was able to leverage it for both of these customers, and that helped me tremendously. I will say there are some really sophisticated multi-channel attribution partners out there that are really incredible. Some of my clients have used those definitely in the past. It can take a long time sometimes to get those set up. In addition to, it can take a long time to agree to purchase them. So basically, in the theme of baby steps and getting started somewhere, both of these customers were good with using our TruePath solution. They know that down the road, TruePath may get more sophisticated and they can continue to take advantage of that, or they can also look at other attribution partners if they need something else. But that is a big hurdle, so I'm not surprised at all at that question, because that's where it gets stuck a lot of the time. People just can't shift out of that once they agree that it makes sense. And a lot of times it's a lot easier for smaller companies to get past that versus larger companies, which is unfortunate. So I'm always, as a third party and working as a partner with my customers, pushing that conversation and trying to get them to make baby steps for these incremental gains.
Michelle, anything in your experience with attribution that you'd like to add?
Yes, I would. In the vein of baby steps, there are actually some toggles and switches that you can pull in Google Analytics for those of you that are real small that maybe you want to test. It's like, because honestly, depending on what you're doing and how you do it, obviously first touch, last touch, attribution don't really tell us the full story, but each company and each company's way that they engage with the campaigns may vary a little bit as to how they attribute how much action to social, how much action to organic search, how much to paid search, that sort of thing. And Google Analytics actually allows us to really play with how much we attribute to one channel or another across a goal. And sometimes just testing and playing with that until you get a really good picture of how that works for you is a great place to start. And that's one of those things that it's built into Google Analytics. You can kind of start there. And then once you kind of understand a little bit more how all of these channels interact and how people interact with your brand on all these various channels, then you can start taking steps forward into paid and feel like the tool that I'm paying for is actually giving me good data back.
Great. So Michelle, I'm going to stick with you on here. We had several questions come in regarding video. You had mentioned video and Facebook. So let's sort of see if we can't talk about video and Facebook all in one shot. So how do you see Facebook? How do you see Facebook as a video engine in awareness evolving over the next year? And another question sort of tagged onto that was, what are some of the demographic attributes to look at? And just sort of let's expound on the whole idea of using video on Facebook.
Okay, well, let me start with the targeting question first, if that's okay. So when you're looking at who to present video to, think a little bit broader than you might usually. So when we're doing like normal lead gen or shopping ads, we try to bake in as much qualification and purchase intent as we possibly can for those audiences in Facebook. So we'll look at like credit card usage, likelihood that they're online shoppers, the fact that maybe they've purchased from us before if we're like an e-com company. All of those things we use to qualify for purchase intent. So like retargeting, Connie mentioned somebody visited and looked at green shoes and then we retargeted them later on Facebook with those green shoes. There's a lot of intent built into the way targeting is done for that sort. So when we look at video targeting, we want to expand that just a little bit. We want to look more at people who are inherently interested in the topic, the subject matter of the video itself. So with caption, when we put video in front of them, obviously we don't want to put it in front of people that it doesn't matter to. There's no reason to bother the general Facebook audience with med mal content, but at the same time, we don't want to limit ourselves too much. So I'm looking at broad doctor targeting at that point. Same thing with your brand. You want to look at the broadest possible targeting for that topic so that you're serving it to a fairly large audience, but you're not serving it to people that it doesn't matter to. Then take the engagement, that 3-second or 10-second video view, and retarget again with the next step in the message. So what we do with video on Facebook is put it in front of an audience that is inherently interested in the topic and then serve them again with like a related blog post the second time around. And then of those people that both watched and read the blog, we serve them with like a lead gen piece where they have to give us some information in order to download a white paper or something like that. So we're building incrementally level on level based on the engagement that they have with us on Facebook. As far as the future of video, okay, I'm already able to put a crafted message in front of people in their newsfeed, but Facebook just opened up recently the ability to do pre-roll and mid-roll ads in other video content on Facebook, much like we've been able to do on YouTube for a long time. If Facebook was ever going to indicate that, hey, we are doubling down, we are really committing to video content, that was it. So several years ago, Mark Zuckerberg made a big announcement at the F8 that we are no longer an internet company, but we're a mobile company, right? That was several years ago. He has more recently said that we are not just a mobile internet company anymore, we are a video company. They're definitely making all the right noises about video, about VR, about AR, because that is the easiest type of content to consume. And honestly, it is psychologically and as far as a positive brand experience, the most sticky is that amount of time that people spend watching video, because it gets their thumbs to stop scrolling for a moment and just pause and give something their undivided attention. Video is not going away. And there's a lot of options for creating video in a way that is, cost effective. Really, if you're not doing video yet in Facebook, now's the time. Don't get behind on this wave because it's here to stay.
Great. Connie, anything you'd like to add to that?
I think Michelle answered it beautifully.
Yeah, a lot of great points. All right, so let's talk about measurement. We have a good question here. How do we design, Connie, we'll go with you. We'll let Michelle take a breath here. How do you design a campaign that utilizes the different and unique features of social and search while sharing a measurable mutual goal? So, right, we look for different things sometimes in search and social. How do you get past that, Connie?
Absolutely. So you have to go to the overarching goals of the company. So often those are revenue goals. So looking at revenue, ROAS, that sort of thing. Often we're also looking at a cost per lead or a CPL goal. So you can generally get that out of Facebook and out of search. So you really have to look at a higher level versus the specifics that maybe today you're looking at for search and social. Look at where the overlap is. Look at what your company goals are. Look at what is reported up to your executives, to your board, et cetera. And then start going down from there. Find your goal, then look at the different creative types that could help you. So look at the different tactics for Facebook and for search that could help you get to that means. And like Michelle talked about video, we talked about the silos, and that's definitely a hurdle for someone who's traditionally done search because unless they've done some YouTube or TrueView ads, they don't have a lot of experience with video. They don't have a lot of collateral, so they have to figure out how to go, from there. And like Michelle said, there are some ways to get video done and make that not a huge hurdle. You also can start with things like carousel ads, et cetera. But definitely go to answer the question or close that loop, go to the overarching goals and then go down versus what you've been doing on a daily basis for search and social.
Michelle, you want to chime in?
I do want to chime in on this one because you're on the right track, and that's definitely the way to start the process. For us, campaign design really is about the overarching goal. But then in order to break out all the aspects of that campaign, we go, okay, here's our goal. We want X number of sales this month, right? That's what matters to the bottom line. But what are the steps necessary to get somebody who is completely unfamiliar with us? They've never heard about us. They haven't really, in some cases on the B2B side, they don't even realize that this is a solution that they need yet. I mean, they haven't even identified a problem. How do you take somebody that has no brand awareness, really doesn't even know they have a problem? What are the steps that somebody that high in the funnel has to go through in order to get to that sale at the end? Usually it's, you can't expect that any one ad, whether in search or social or an organic play or anything, is going to get that result in one try. Rather, you have to break it down into what are the steps that actually get us there, and how do we craft a campaign that engages all of those steps, and then spread your budget out across all of those steps to get you to the goal. That way, that's where attribution kind of comes into play too, because now we're only spending the necessary amount of money on, say, Facebook to get that unaware consumer up to the point of consideration. At that point, we may very well hand off that customer to paid search in order to finish the consideration phase and make the purchase. By crafting a campaign that way, we spend the right amount of money in the right place, and we attribute the right amount of lift to the right channels in order to get us to that final business goal.
Great. Okay, so here's a question that sort of looks at the flip side of that. Michelle, I'm going to stay with you on this. So, since you were just speaking, what recommendations do you have on sharing targeting or audience strategies between search and social? In other words, working together from a messaging standpoint. So here the previous question said, how do you take the unique aspects and find a shared measurement? Here we're asking, how do you target in a consistent branded way for the two different media? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And actually, in order to really dial in and make sure that we're getting the right customer at the right moment, social and search really do need to talk, because while search is paying attention to keywords and what they're targeting and what they're bidding on, that insight tells us what kind of language people are using once they're to a consideration or purchase phase. That language usage, that intent that search knows about because they're looking at it every day, is information that social needs in order to really define psychologically who the audience is. That search intent, those keywords are a part of the psychographic targeting that we use in social. We need that information. Conversely, search really needs to have a better sense of what we see in social about how people talk to one another about things. Before they ever go to search to look for something very, very specific, how are they talking to one another? Are there semantic keywords that maybe we should be paying attention to because they're using it in talking to one another that they don't necessarily engage when they're going to search? So we get a lot of semantic conversational information out of social that search needs, and we get a lot of intent information for social to really dial in the targeting on both sides. The more that search and social can talk about the various aspects of targeting, the more we have that dialed in at every phase of the customer journey.
Connie, anything to add?
Definitely. So I would absolutely agree with Michelle, and I would just add to that a lot of times those long tail keywords, which I know a lot of people, especially like Bing, are talking a lot about long tail because of voice and because of all of the devices that we have now. With those long tail searches, we can find out a lot about what people are thinking. We're going to see more what they're searching for, what's compelling to them. Often we see this as an initial search at the top of the funnel, and then they go to Facebook. If we can retarget to them based upon that in the right voice that speaks to that long tail search, then what we see is them going back to search and Googling or Binging, for lack of a better word, is something that's much more specific. So they might be searching for a meetup or something. They've moved to a new town, so they're like, I want to find friends in Austin. And then they go on Facebook, and Facebook retargets them with some ads for specific groups, and they don't convert on Facebook. And later they go on search and like, oh, wait, you know what? There was a group for people just like me, people who like to go water skiing kind of thing, and then they convert and then they buy water skis. So definitely finding that basically listening, being able to listen across search and social is really important, and then finding your voice to speak specifically to those audiences, that search, what that person has talked about on social, what they're interested in responding to.
Great. All right, let's see if we can get to one or two more here. Connie, this came in during your presentation, so I'm going to direct this to you. It has to do about how long do you wait until you see some results? So the specific question is, how long would you run a search campaign before you would expect to see results? Should it be ongoing or more targeted for specific pages or products where then we need to look at our SEO and if that needs improvement?
Okay, so the question is,
go ahead.
Sure. It's about a search intent to social campaign, right?
Mm-hmm.
How long should you run it before? Okay, I think that's what they're asking. How long should we be running this? What's a good amount of time to test? To basically run a pilot and proof it out. And it really depends on what you're selling. So if the customer life cycle, takes a long time to convert, then you need to do this longer. It depends on your goals. So maybe your goal is to leverage search and social so it doesn't take 6 months to convert on an expensive product that you sell. Maybe it takes 5 months to convert. So it really depends. In both of the cases that I talked about, we did pretty short flights. I would definitely say 2 days is probably too short unless you are doing some sort of an amazing big sale. So would look at finding a time of the year, maybe when things are not too crazy, to do a pilot and proof it out. Choose a 3 to 4 week span generally, unless it takes a lot longer than that for conversions to happen, depending on your product. And then proof it out during that time, course correct on anything so that you can then deploy different campaigns throughout the year at other times of the year.
Michelle, anything from your experience that you'd like to add?
I think the only thing I'd like to add is that people need to understand with proofing things out and running tests like this, they really need to engage the scientific method. Just because your test doesn't necessarily prove your hypothesis, that doesn't necessarily mean that your test is a failure. What you need to do is kind of take one step back away from that, oh, this didn't work attitude, and go, okay, we didn't get the result that we expected. Yes, but why? Because that why question is what really leads us towards success. It's not necessarily that our hypothesis was wrong so much as that's an opportunity to dig a little bit deeper. And I find with clients as well as with our internal teams that every once in a while, man, if our pet hypothesis just doesn't pan out, we want to dump it and completely walk away from it. And I hate seeing anybody put a budget toward a test and go, we didn't get anything out of that. Yes, you did, but you need to set aside a few preconceived notions and go, okay, so what did the data actually tell us? Forget what our hypothesis was for a moment, and what can we glean? What learnings can we get out of that? And that's when I think a lot of companies kind of take a deep breath and go, okay, I'm a lot less afraid to spend money on a test when I realize that regardless of the outcome, I'm going to get some valuable information out of it. I think that's kind of a big barrier regardless of which channel you're operating in, whether it's search, social, anything. If you can realize that any test that I run provides me with valuable information, you're going to get more out of it.
All right. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. Thank you, Michelle and Connie, for a very informative and timely presentation. And I want to thank our audience for all of your great questions. We had quite a few there. We did run out of time. If we didn't get to your question, don't worry. We're going to pass all of them along to our friends at Marin for following up. So a special thank you to our sponsor, Marin Software, which you can visit, as you see here, at www.marinsoftware.com. That's all for our broadcast today. We look forward to seeing you next time, right here at Digital Marketing Depot.